Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Library and Historical Society. We're so excited to have you here tonight for one of our author series. We're so happy and honored to welcome Kristina Cho to talk about her new cookbook, Chinese Enough, Homestyle Recipes for Noodles, Dumplings, Stir Fries, and more. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to please check out all of our exciting upcoming programs we have here at the library on our website. If you're a fan of cooking, which I recognize some of you here, we're having 2 more cookbook authors come this year. Next week, Christopher Kimball's coming of America's Test Kitchen in Milk Street. The main room is full right now, but the overflow room still has a ton of space. And people are just starting to figure that out, so you could get a heads up on all of them. And then in November, on November 18th, we're so excited to welcome best-selling cookbook author Julia Turshen to discuss her new book, What Goes With What? 100 Recipes, 20 Charts, and Endless Possibilities. So I hope to see some of you back here then. At any point tonight, you can buy copies of both of Kristina's books are for sale in the back, thanks to our local independent bookstore, The Learned Owl. Now let me introduce our speakers for tonight. Is it? All right. All right, so our guest moderator this evening is Aubrey Johansson. She's better known as That's What She Eats. She is a passionate recipe developer, food stylist, and celebrated for her bold, colorful culinary creations. She is formerly a personal chef to professional athletes and now enjoys her life in Cleveland with her wife and son. She shares her love of food through vibrant recipes, captivating online content, and blending her culinary expertise with creativity. She's currently working on her debut cookbook, and she's excited for the delicious adventures ahead. And now for our speaker, Kristina Cho is an award-winning cookbook author and creator of Icho Food. Her food is influenced by her Chinese heritage and Midwestern upbringing. She was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and now lives out in the San Francisco Bay Area. Her first cookbook, which is for sale back there, is Mooncakes and Milk Bread. It came out in 2021 and was described as an instant classic by the New York Times and went on to win 2 James Beard Awards. Her recipes have been featured in Food and Wine magazine, Food Network magazine, New York Times. Her latest cookbook, Chinese Enough, came out earlier this month. Please welcome Kristina and Aubrey. Thank you for joining us.
Let's check. Okay. Hello? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Hey. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. I want to welcome Kristina. She's home.
Yes.
Originally from the Cleveland area. How does it feel to be back?
It feels great. I'm back in Westlake right now, which is where I was born and raised. I was just telling Aubrey how I've never slept so much in my life than being back at my parents' house. I've been on book tour for about 3 weeks now, and it's felt very nonstop. But as soon as I got to my parents' house, I slept for about 11 hours, and it was really glorious. So
some sort of magic recipe at our parents' house, right? And your parents are here tonight?
Yeah, they're sitting in the front right there. There's my dad on his phone.
Hi. That's so great. That's so great to see you guys. Okay, well, congratulations on book number 2, Chinese Enough.
Thanks.
This is really awesome. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the inspo for the book. Did you have an aha moment where you were like, okay, I'm ready. I'm writing book 2. This is what it's about. Tell us what that looked like for you.
Yeah, there were a bunch of different inspirations that kind of led me to writing this book. In terms of an aha moment, I had one really great meal at my parents' house. I don't know if my parents remember this, but you do. Okay. It was December 2020, and my husband and I had just driven across the country from San Francisco to first New Jersey and then Cleveland. But it had been about a year since I had seen my family. And of course, if you imagine 2020, it was a very stressful, dark time. We had plans to meet up for dinner. I had driven across, I was staying in an Airbnb downtown, and I had driven to my parents' house, and as we approached, the lights were off, no one was home, and then I called my mom, and they were about a minute out from our Airbnb downtown. At some point we got our wires crossed, and I think I had suggested like, oh, should we just order pizza? You know, you can come home, we order pizza. And you were like, don't worry about it. We'll just cook, which is like such a answer from my parents. Like they're always just ready to cook instead of ordering out on something that probably wouldn't be as good. And so they came home, and then within an hour, they had made this really amazing, comforting, like home-style Chinese dinner. There was tomato egg, which is a recipe in the book. I think you probably made some soup. You made this stir-fried squid with black bean garlic sauce and peppers because you just had squid in the freezer. And you made some perfect steamed rice with some Chinese sausage in it. And I remember thinking how like, oh, it's been so long since I've had food like this that reminded me of home. And I had just submitted the manuscript to Mooncakes and Milk Bread, and in my mind I wanted a little bit of a break, but then I didn't actually get a break because I felt so inspired to write this second book because I wanted to capture this spirit of comfort and family in a book. So that was like my aha moment that I'm like ready to write this second book. But then it kind of, I spent 4 years writing this book. So there were a lot of different things that like influenced me. It started off as like a dinner book, like recipes that are really accessible that you can make Monday through Thursday or Friday. There's definitely a huge chunk of recipes in the book that are kind of within that line. But while I was writing it, Mooncakes and Milk Bread came out, the James Beard Awards happened. I also got older and kind of learned more about the way that I like to cook and also celebrate with the people around me. And so the book just got way more dynamic, a little bit beyond dinner. It was more about how to welcome the community that makes you feel seen and loved within your home, and center it around food.
That's beautiful. There's a lot of impact I find in this book, and I hope that you obviously feel that way as well. And if it has taken 4 years to write that, this, is going to be in so many people's homes, but it's like this journal that we talked about, this like snapshot of just 4 years of your life. And one day you look back and remember exactly where you were and what you were doing and who you were with and who you were feeding. And that is incredible. I want to hear about the day that you got the James Beard call.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know how many people know this story, or the call that I was nominated or the call that I won.
That you won.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I could not go to the James Beard Awards because I was getting married. It was the same day. I remember when I found out that I had gotten nominated, I had this kind of like feeling in deep in my chest. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I can go. I don't know why. I had a feeling that there was going to be some sort of conflict. And then I saw that I was on June 11th, 2022. I'm like, oh, that's my wedding day. I definitely cannot go. Like, definitely.
Did you think that you would change it at all? Like, did you have any sort of like, maybe we should...
My husband and I thought about it for maybe like a millisecond.
Yeah.
But no, we were not going to change our plans. I think we were hoping like, oh, like what if they're on a Sunday and we could, our wedding was on a Saturday. I'm like, oh, like what if we flew like the next day to Chicago so that we could still go to the awards? But it wasn't. It was the same day. So yeah, it was our wedding day, and I found out a few moments before I put on my wedding dress. My brother's now wife, Kristen, she was the one who was checking Twitter at the time, and was the one that just shouted like, "You won!" And then I was a little paralyzed. It was we can imagine on your wedding day, it's already a lot of emotions that you're trying to process, but then also this like very monumentous moment in my career that I honestly never imagined for myself was also happening at the same time. So now that's my fun fact.
Yeah.
That I tell people.
It's like two truths and a lie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What would your lie be?
That I'm a really good singer.
Oh, okay. There's still time. Turn that mic up. I want to talk about your love letter to Kewpie in here. Yeah, I'm a big Mayo girl.
Me too.
So
I think it's because we're from Ohio.
Yeah, honestly, it's that Midwest. It's the the gateway to ranch.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, tell me about this.
Yeah, so that was actually a suggestion by my editor. She was like, "Why don't you dedicate?" At the time, I don't think she thought I was going to write a love letter. She thought I was going to write like a sidebar, which in terms of books is normally just like a small little blurb on the side of a recipe to kind of explain the importance of a recipe. And I was like, I'm going to write a love letter. And so I wrote that love letter to Kewpie because I do reference it so much. It's the base for the potato salad, the pasta salad in there. I use it as a drizzle on the shrimp and ketchup fried rice. I use it very, very often. I go through Kewpie very quickly. At one of my other book talks, someone asked me how my Midwestern influence kind of crept its way into my cooking, and my initial answer was my love of mayo. It's the most like is maybe like the most clear example of my Midwesternness. But then in the other recipes, it's so much more nuanced than that. It goes beyond the love of mayo and like creamy things and stuff, or the love of like, I don't know, salads and stuff. Like I feel like my Midwestern influence is definitely present in like the way I approach a recipe, like very practical. Like growing up, I feel like my parents were always wanted to cook without waste, using what was available, what was accessible and affordable, and also this like sense of openness in the term in how we feed and like cook people, you know? So sorry, I took that question beyond mayo a little bit.
So good. Mayo love runs deep.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's
it
good.
It connects people.
It really does. I mean, it does. Okay. So
Also, if no one knows if you don't know what Kewpie mayo is, sorry, I should explain it.
Yeah.
Kewpie mayo is a Japanese mayo. It has, I believe it probably has a higher ratio of egg yolks in there. And so it's a little creamier, a little sweet. And it just tastes extra good. I personally love the ergonomics of the bottle. It's like shaped kind of like a baby doll, so that it has a belly that you squeeze, and it has a really fine nozzle tip so that you can get really nice lines of mayo on whatever you want to put it on.
On anything and everything.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So do you have a favorite recipe like right now in the book? And I'm sure it's like changed over time, but like right now, what is number one for you?
It changes all the time because there's 125 recipes in here. It's a good value book. There's a lot in there. I think right now what's really popular that I've been seeing, and it's been making me kind of crave it a little bit, are the Miso Pork Meatballs.
No sauce, right?
Yeah,
and you're
no,
like very adamant.
they're sauceless meatballs.
No sauce.
But they're really juicy. I think I was telling you how they're cooked. Like they're very easy to mix up. You make this base of miso, soy sauce, ground grated ginger, this paste of like tons and tons of flavor, and then you mix it in with ground pork, an egg, and some panko breadcrumbs. It has a really light texture. I was trying to mimic the texture of actually a lion head meatball, if you ever heard of that. It's a very classic style of Chinese meatball. It's very light and airy, but it also takes time because you actually cook it and then braise it for a long time. This meatball will be done in about 20 minutes or so. It's so quick. And you pan fry it, but then you cover it with a lid so that the residual steam from the pan just kind of gradually, gently cooks your meatball without overcooking it, because I think a fear of meatball cooking is getting that center cooked all the way through, especially if it's pork. So those have been really, really popular lately, and I want to make them.
They look incredible. I was telling you, my son, he's 1, and he is like a meatball machine. So of course we have that page bookmarked. You shot this book yourself. Mm-hmm. You took all of the photos of your food. You plated it. That is huge. Usually cookbooks go to huge photography teams and stylists and all these people. What was the decision like for you to keep it to yourself? And also, like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I actually did that with my first cookbook as well. Not that I wanted to. So just some background with my first cookbook, Mooncakes and Milk Bread. I shot that all during 2020. I had about 2 months before the world shut down, and I had to kind of adjust the way that I was approaching my workflow. But with that book, I didn't really feel comfortable in like inviting people into my home and like working close quarters to shoot it. And I have I have a design background, you know, like I know my way around a camera and lighting and stuff. So I shot my first book, and that was a huge kind of learning experience for me about how to style food and make food look really appetizing, especially with buns where most of them are brown. They're like brown and round. So that taught me a lot about how to make food look good. With Chinese Enough, from the very beginning when I wrote the proposal for my book, I had a really clear visual direction of what I wanted it to look like. Not necessarily starting with the fact that I was going to shoot it. I was open to the idea of someone else doing it, but as I mentioned again, a lot of stuff was going on while I was writing this book, awards and moving and stuff like that. And so by the time I was reaching my deadline of shooting my book, I had about a month, and I was like, I can do it. I can shoot all of this in a month. At that same time, my husband's an architect, and he was renovating. He did the designs for our house, and we were supposed to move in. My kitchen was supposed to be ready, but it wasn't. So when we moved into our house, we had no countertops. We didn't have running water. Our gas hookup wasn't ready. And so I had to make a last minute decision to ask my friends, my really close friends in the Bay Area, if I could just come into their house and commandeer their kitchens for about 3 days each, and cook Thanksgiving levels of food in their homes. Eventually I got to get back into my house and things were installed and I could actually cook there. If you look at some of the photos, I'm thinking of there's a dumpling party photo shoot in there. If you look really closely, you'll be able to see unpainted trim, and I remember our exhaust hood, it had not yet been plastered, so my contractors stapled paper, white paper, to cover it up, and you can't even tell if you look that hard. But I actually think that's a really interesting story to tell now, and I actually think it makes the book really unique. I think the photography, I wanted it to feel very documentary style. Like I was taking a shot of a dish that I was making for my friends. Like the food is real, the food is hot. It's not like oftentimes in a studio setting, the food has been sitting around for a long time, or they're just brushing oil on top to make it look glossy still. Like I don't do any of that. The food is very real. And also it was, in a way, a final way for me to test these recipes in an unfamiliar environment. I take a lot of pride in testing my recipes so that they work in any situation. Because the reality is, most people aren't cooking their food in a gourmet kitchen with tons of burners, like the top of the line pans and stuff like that. And not that my friends' kitchens weren't nice, but they were all so different. You know, they had like old pans and like different size burners, and like each oven temperature was like different, you know? And so the food that's depicted on the pages is food that was made in a scenario that wasn't ideal and wasn't perfect, but it's still great and worthy of sharing and feeding the people around you. And so I was honestly happy that now I'm happy looking back. It was very stressful at the time, but I'm very happy that was kind of how the photos turned out.
It was like a new take on family style.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if these recipes are inspired by your family and like feeding the people that you love, you got to do that in such a different way by shooting this book, you know, like I'm not sure that other cookbook authors can say that they fed the people that they love all of the recipes in their book. You know?
Exactly. Like there's a Lunar New Year photo shoot in the book that kind of talks about the new and old traditions that I like to make around Lunar New Year. And my parents were there for that shoot. I was cooking it in one of my really good family friends' kitchens, and they're very inspiring cooks as well. And the food that we're eating in that photo shoot is present in the recipe for like the roast pork. Like everything that we're eating at that dinner was also photographed as like the hero shot for that specific recipe. And then for all my shoots, like the food actually, like at the end of the shoot, we just like sit and like debrief and eat it together. And in a way, I wasn't totally alone. Like, yes, I was shopping and lugging and cooking all the food in someone else's kitchen, but like my friends were around me, and like they would step in to be like hand models if they needed it, and just generally were there to support me. So I wasn't totally alone in the process.
It's like you got to experience your book on the other side too, which I think is very, very cool. So you're quite the gardener, and you talk a little bit about this in the book that you learned from your grandmother. Is that right?
Kind of.
Okay.
I would say that my grandma, it's hard for her in terms of recipes and also like her gardening prowess. Like she's not the best teacher, I would say. Like she's like doing her thing, and I would just grow up observing her. And it wasn't until the last couple of years when I started making food my career that she would kind of like let me in to get details of what she was making. Like I have her jong recipe, which are these like sticky bundles of sticky rice with like pork belly and sausage and peanuts. It's very, very delicious. But that's not a recipe that she would easily give up. You know, like you kind of have to like be in there with the kitchen. And same thing with like gardening. She has given me a few seeds that are essentially like generations beyond the seeds that she either started when she first moved to Cleveland in the 60s, or some of them are brought back from Hong Kong or given to her by friends also in like the Chinese community in Cleveland. And so I have a few seeds from her that she's passed down to me that I'm trying to grow. I'm working on my green beans. For some reason, they don't totally take off in my backyard, but I have a bitter melon plant that's like really thriving in our backyard right now. But I think as a kid, I look back to her garden and I wish I had spent more time there to kind of take more knowledge from her about how she would figure out her planting schedule and things like that. But obviously it still has inspired me. It's like something I'm trying to like relearn and like reconnect.
Absolutely. And then whatever you're growing right now in your garden in this season, like, does that influence the recipes that you're creating? Are you constantly thinking like you have like an invitation to readers to make their own dumplings in here with a bunch of different ingredients? And I love that. It like gives us a chance to be the chef for a minute. Do you like with your tomato egg, like, is this like, we're only doing this in peak tomato season? Are you adding like squash as the end of the season? What does that look like?
Yeah, my garden definitely impacts what I cook at the time. Like right now, our fig tree is going off, and so there's about 5,000 figs that are waiting for me to do something with. There is a recipe in the dessert chapter called tofu pudding with figs and ginger syrup, but that only utilizes about 5 figs. But it it is an option to use when I have a lot of that. But yeah, an example with the tomatoes, definitely I'll use my abundance of tomatoes to make tomato egg. Tomatoes are heavily used in the recipes in the book as just like a fresh pop of acidity or brightness. It's in the hot and sour soup. It's in various salads. But I also think that specifically with the tomato egg, that is a dish that can be made all year round because it's so flavorful. In the recipe, I call for just like regular Roma tomatoes I can get at the grocery store all year round. But the fact that it's amped up with oyster sauce and there's just like a really deep flavor, a savory base to it that it'll taste good even when it's not the summertime. But definitely in the summertime, it's peak delicious.
How has living in San Francisco kind of influenced your cooking? Has it helped change anything? Like, what do you notice?
I think the action of me moving to the Bay Area 10 years ago really made me into a cook. It forced me to cook because I think, not that I wasn't always really interested in cooking living here, but my parents were always so close by and they were really, really great cooks. And so I could always drive home, like when I was in college, and enjoy the food that I love. But when I moved to San Francisco, I was suddenly across the country. It was a 5-hour flight away. That was kind of expensive, that I couldn't take that often. And so being out there was really allowed me to kind of come into my own as a cook. I could figure out what worked for me in terms of my style. And then I also found so much inspiration in the San Francisco Bay Area. There's such a rich and like heavy Asian culture and also just like diverse culture out there that I was learning so much about all these different styles of food and also styles of cooking out there. So I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine like what kind of cook I would be if I didn't move out there.
Yeah, and I think, we take pieces of where we are and where we've been and like use it to influence our recipes. But I think I read in here that your husband, Ruben, took you to your favorite dim sum restaurant now. Yeah. What was the blind trust like there? Like, was this before you guys were married? You were like, okay, you're taking me somewhere, it better be good. Were you like, if you say it's good, or you thought, okay, well, we'll see.
It was definitely before we were married. It was when we first started dating. And at first I was a little skeptical about his restaurant choices because he is not Asian. He's a Jewish man from New Jersey. But as I got to know him, I feel like the reason why we connected is because we had such similar tastes in food. If anything, people always ask me, like, oh, like, do you have to like convince him to try different foods? Never. He is like the most open-minded and fearless eater I have probably ever met. Unless he's allergic to cherries, so he's not going to eat that. But he, like, unless it's going to make him deathly ill, like he's so open to try everything. And yeah, when he took me to Good Luck Dim Sum, which is my favorite, like little hole in the wall dim sum spot in San Francisco, I was like, okay, you have taste.
All right, you're like, we could do another date after this.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so it added to like the pros list for him.
For sure. It was
Okay.
it was a green flag.
All right, that's good. I guess we're almost out of time for our talking.
Are we really?
I know. You're incredible.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, we could just like keep going, but it is a fall night in Cleveland. Obviously, it's like a little chilly. It's like the perfect cozy weather. What is your go-to comfort meal? Whether you're cooking it, you're ordering it, like what is bringing you comfort?
Oh my gosh, that's really hard. I think I would probably make a noodle soup of some sort. There are 2 noodle soups, actually 3, if you count the Spam and macaroni soup that's in there. That is a noodle. But I was initially thinking of the caramelized onion and beef noodle soup. I can't wait until it's a little colder in San Francisco for me to make that. But it's kind of inspired by Taiwanese beef noodle soup and a little bit of inspiration from pho. But the base starts with a ton of caramelized onions to create this like really aromatic and like slightly sweet base of the broth. And then you add some short ribs in there and let it braise with a bunch of other aromatics like spices like star anise and cinnamon. And you let that braise for a really long time until the beef is like super, super tender. And then you serve it with some rice noodles. And the soup actually tastes better the next day. It makes a lot of soup. So the next day I'll sometimes just like sip on the broth in the morning, and it's really, really cozy.
Maybe grab like a miso meatball cold out of the fridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect. With us finishing up this conversation, as you've been on tour now for weeks and you've been talking about this book for weeks, is there anything that you want to share that you have really enjoyed like saying about this book in particular that we haven't talked about tonight?
I think that's a really good question. I think I have really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of talk about why this book is unique and maybe different than your standard or like classic Chinese or Asian cookbook. I think going into writing this book, I wanted the opportunity to kind of expand people's definition of what Asian American cooking can be. I think for a long time, people would assume like kind of like takeout style recipes or like super traditional stuff, like which tradition has its place. And there's definitely like a lot of traditional recipes in the book that kind of act as this level of preservation, keeping recipes that mean a lot to me. But it's also an opportunity for me to kind of express what it's like for me to be an Asian American person in the modern day, and add a little bit of dimension to these recipes. And I think my goal with it was to make a really accessible cookbook. I think that there are kind of a lot of mental barriers for people sometimes cooking outside of their wheelhouse, and so I really wanted these recipes to be easy, accessible, but then also special. Because when something's special, you want to make it again and again and kind of recreate that feeling when you make a recipe. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about the book.
I think you definitely did that. This book invites, writing in the margins and starring so many pages and so many favorites. And it gives you this kind of like freedom also to try something and then make it your own as well. It's really beautiful. So congratulations.
Thanks.
So great. And then I think Alexandra is going to help us out with a little Q&A from the community that's here.
Yeah, does anyone have a question to start with?
Yes, in the front.
I saw earlier in the year you went to Hong Kong. Did you bring back any new flavors or ideas from that trip?
Yeah, I'll just repeat in case anyone can't hear it. So she asked about my recent trip to Hong Kong, and I actually took that last year with just my dad and I. He and I went to Hong Kong together just to see some family, and I also felt like I needed a little final push of inspiration to finish my manuscript. So this was it was May 2023, and I had a few more months until my manuscript was due. Oddly enough, I feel like one recipe that like I needed help with was my roast chicken recipe. I I grew up watching a lot of Food Network, and I feel like the Food Network sort of brainwashed everyone in my generation that we needed to know how to roast a chicken. We needed to roast a chicken in order to like get married and like succeed in life or something, you know, like I blame it on Ina Garten. And so I really wanted a roast chicken recipe in my book. And I'd probably tested like a dozen different approaches to a roast chicken, just trying to figure out like what my roast chicken was going to be. And we went to Hong Kong, and not that I ate like a chicken that like necessarily tasted exactly like this, but I got the idea for like a sha cha roast chicken. And sha cha sauce is a very common like kind of Cantonese style barbecue sauce that the base of it is a really bright and briny shrimp paste with like ginger and garlic. It doesn't necessarily taste super seafoody. It just adds this like really nice umami sweetness to it. And I feel like I would taste things that had shrimp paste like in the mixture of stuff. I'm like, this is an ingredient that I should utilize more often or celebrate more. And I had already used it in like my fried rice recipe and my noodle soup. And I was like, I think this is like the key ingredient to my roast chicken. So that was one thing. And then it also kind of allowed me to reflect a little bit about my relationship with seemingly my home country, which I think is something that a lot of first generation kids or even immigrant kids have. It's like a process to kind of find some resolve with that, you know, because you feel like, oh, I'm going to my home country, I should be like totally comfortable. But that's not necessarily the case, because I still grew up here, you know, and I don't necessarily speak the language. And so I think spending a few days there, seeing my family gave me a lot to reflect on and write about in some of the different essays that are in the book. Any other questions? I saw you first. Hi.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I own Mooncakes and Milk Bread. High recommendation, people.
Thank you.
But I am a first-generation Taiwanese American, and you know, I think something that I really value about your cookbooks is that I feel like it really demystify a lot of the foods that have just such a high nostalgia value for me. So it's been just a wonderful way for me to like reconnect with my family in a very unique kind of way. But my question with respect to Chinese enough is, you had mentioned that the cookbook evolved in the writing and that you had originally anticipated it as a weekday dinner sort of cookbook, and that it evolved as you were evaluating like different ways that you could connect with people over food. Can you share a little bit about like how that evolution happened?
Yeah, that's a really great question. As I said earlier, it started off as just dinner, like a dinner time cookbook. My original title was called "Have You Eaten Yet?", which is a really common phrase like among family members across all cultures. You know, like instead of asking "Hello, how are you?" you just say "Have you eaten yet?" and it's like kind of a gauge about how you feel. I ended up changing that title to just. It's really hard to figure out a title, something that immediately gives someone a clear idea about the vibe and direction of the book. And so that was also a journey too over the 4 years of me writing this book. As I was writing it, I wanted it to feel deeper and expand on my experience as a Chinese American person. And something I started thinking about was in my line of work, food and stuff, I always get this like influx of media requests or projects around Lunar New Year. And at first I'm like, oh, that's really nice. You know, like, oh, people like care. But then like 5 years later, I was thinking like, I'm Asian every day. And it would be really nice to have this food celebrated every single day and have people realize that this food is important every single day. And so beyond just like a weeknight dinner sort of situation, I wanted to incorporate like the Take It Outside, which is kind of dedicated to my love of barbecuing, cooking outside picnics, the Banquet-Worthy chapter, which is for Lunar New Year, but you can also, tons of those recipes are great for like Thanksgiving or any sort of like family get together or little celebrations in your life. And so I wanted to create a Chinese cookbook that was different than other Chinese cookbooks and give people inspiration and reasons to kind of cook this food not only during Asian night or Lunar New Year, you know? And I think that I got the courage to kind of expand the book in that way after writing Mooncakes and Milk Bread, Mooncakes and Milk Bread is about Chinese baking, but I also folded in a lot of like personal stories about why, say, like a bolo bao or a pineapple bun is so important to my family. It's my dad's favorite bun, or like my grandpa's almond cookies, like that story in there. And I was at first really nervous about being vulnerable with those stories, but after that book came out and so many people came out to tell me how much those stories meant to them, it gave me more reason to incorporate that style of writing in Chinese enough and be a little bit more vulnerable and like, again, dig a little deeper into these dinner recipes. It goes beyond dinner. Thanks. I think there's another question up here.
You answered my question.
Okay.
I was going to ask how you came up with the title.
Yeah, so I can talk about that a little bit more. So as I mentioned, the first title was called Have You Eaten Yet? Then I pitched another title that my publisher was like, it's okay, but we'll keep it for now. And it was called There's Food at Home. And I actually still really love that title. Someone on my team was like, I kind of like it. It made you feel like, oh, how do I tell someone I'm from the Midwest without saying I'm from the Midwest? Like there's food at home. Like I'm just gonna cook. But then again, you need to come up with something like a little catchier, a little bit more clear. And I came up with Chinese enough at the end of writing my manuscript, which is like kind of rare. I think a lot of times you come up with a title first, and that's like in a way your thesis or what you're working towards. And not that I wasn't working towards Chinese enough, I just could not come up with like a catchy way to bring it all together until the very end after writing essays and reflecting and like mostly finishing up the recipes. And I came up with it, and I was a little nervous to pitch it to my editor because I just wasn't sure if she would get it. But when I said it, I saw that there was a little bit of recognition in her eyes that she got it. I think for me, Chinese enough is like there's a little bit of humor behind it, but it's also kind of quietly powerful, which is like very much more my style. You know, it's like a very quiet statement of just saying like I am enough after a lifetime of not feeling either Asian or American enough. Yes.
Just two questions. First one is, do you have any plans for a third book or other plans regarding the second question is, I'm really curious about your parents' thoughts on your two books and also their contribution, of course, your parents' contribution.
Sure. So yeah, to answer your first question about what I'm working on next, I think I'm working on resting primarily. I've been working on this project for so long, but again, I felt that way after Mooncakes and Milk Bread. And I do have ideas for a book 3 and a book 4. Coming up with concepts and coming up with more and more recipes has never been a challenge for me. A challenge for me is how to organize it and not like, I don't know, like put myself all over the place and lose focus. So I have ideas for a 3rd and a 4th. There might be some sort of noodle book in the future and one that focuses on breakfast. That's all I can say. So yeah, I have that in the future. Regarding my parents, Mom, do you want to talk? You don't want to talk? Well, you couldn't hear the question? Okay. The question was, how do you feel about my work and maybe also your contributions to the book? Do you want a mic? I think she's going to come with mic. Yeah.
I was actually thinking about talking about it after everybody asked their question.
You're going to get a mic, Mom.
Okay. I was actually thinking about saying something after all the questions and stuff like that, since Mom is here right now, kind of thing. But she always give me praises like that I inspired her. But she developed her own kind of work, and I am amazed of what she has done. And my mom's always amazed. She always say, she's tried to carry all the traditional food that she asked me one time. It's kind of like, well, Mom, do you know how to cook that stuff where Papa makes this stuff? You're a grandmom. And I said, no, I don't know how to do it. And she go, well, how are we going to carry this tradition, and make sure that it's going to carry on for the next generation and the next generation? And that's what she did with the book, the first book, because she kept the tradition going, and now it's not forgotten. And it's like, I am amazed of her.
Thank you, Mom.
Because I don't know how to do it. And it's I use that book so often. And it's and it's like, it's so easy. It's like kind of like, oh my God. It's kind of like, like I say, I could cook, but sometimes it's like, I just do here. Every couple minutes and just kind of feel it. But when you have a recipe, everything is set. And it's like the measure is there. So it's so easy. Everything's set and just throw everything in and it'll come out perfect. That one time we were in San Francisco and she was making Mom's spaghetti.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, she was making it. I said, oh, you got that done within 20 minutes? It took me forever.
Yeah.
Because everything was all set. And it's precise that it's like when you do it, it's always going to come out good. And then one thing about her first book the first book was so amazing to me because I don't know how to bake. And the title of Mooncake when it came out is kind of like, when she showed me, I just said, oh my God, how do you make mooncake? Because it's kind of, in our tradition, mooncake is supposed to be made by a master chef. And no one in the Chinese culture, well, I can't say no one, people would know, but me, I do not have it. And a lot of family buys it and stuff like that. And when she was showing me how to do this, I said, really? That's it? That easy? Kind of thing. And so I got inspired. And I learned a lot of skill from her that I don't know, and I come back home and try different things and stuff like that. And when she taught me how to do the mooncake, when I came home, I was like, I'm going to whip this up to myself. And I pulled that book and took the recipe and everything. And she showed me the technique because I didn't know how to do all these little gadgets and stuff like that. And it came out amazing. And with the Joan
Mom.
and stuff like that, I
Mom.
do not know how to do it. My mom is like, in the recipe book, the book in there is a lot of old traditional Chinese things which I don't know how to do, but I love eating it. And my mom has this store in her head kind of thing, and that's where she got the inspiration. It's like, Mom don't know how to do it, then we need to learn how to do this and stuff like that. But the mooncake, it was Mooncake Festival, said, I'm going to try making this and stuff like that. And it came out really, really, really good. So me, where I work at the hospital, I love making food for my friend, and I said, oh, it's like it, and I bought it in, and here's my best friend. I gave it to Debbie, and she said, how is it good? She said, oh, God, it's really good. And I've been making a lot of the recipe that's in her book, especially baked goods, which I don't bake, but every time I bring something in, and all my friends say, oh, my God, this is amazing. I said, well, I got it from the book. It's like I don't have the skill, but it came out pretty good. But I'm going to stop now. But the thing that is amazing is my mom, when I show her the book, that she didn't really understand the concept that she was a cookbook author. And she was
My mom
writing
or
a
my
book.
grandma's 90 years old, so
Huh? And she's 92
yeah.
years old. And I show her the book, and I show her all her Instagram when she was making the stuff. And her phrase is that girl, it's kind of like, it's amazing that she could do it. Everyone else in the family could not learn how to keep the tradition and learn, because she wanted people to learn and keep the tradition, and no one in the family could do it. But she did it, and she was so amazed, and she said, she shakes her head and she go, that girl.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom. Okay, we were going to be here for a long time.
I'm so sorry I talked a lot, but one more thing. I talk loud anyway. One more thing I have to say that she's never gonna say. My father loves her so much, and he's not here now, but he would be so proud of her, about everything that she has done, just like my mom. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks. I hope that answered your question. But that's my mom. That's very much her. She's very emotional and loves to share, and will talk to anybody for as long as you're willing to listen. So.
We can
Thanks.
do 2 more questions.
After
If anyone, or we could go straight to the signing.
No, we can answer another question. Thanks, Mom.
I was thinking something along the lines of that. I was wondering, is there still a recipe that you're holding on to that will mean a lot to you and yourself that you've made that you want to pass to generations that you never shared?
There are, okay, so her question was, is there a recipe in the book or not in the? Oh. Yeah, so her question is there a recipe out there that I kind of keep to myself that I don't really want to share yet? Probably. I think sometimes I think if anything there's recipes that are maybe part of like the life that my husband and I have made, and then because I like to think of all my projects as like different phases. As you said before, they're kind of like the snapshot of the last 4 years of my life. And I feel like the last 4 years I've been like digging so deep into who I am and who my family has made me to be and like their story. And yeah, there are some recipes, so one like kind of funny recipe, it's not that deep, but there's these style of recipes that I never thought anyone would care about because they're like so easy, and maybe I'm working up the courage to see if they're like recipe worthy. Like my mom the other day, she made these Chinese tacos where I showed Aubrey this the other day, and so like instead of a tortilla, you're using like a green onion pancake or a paratha, like some flaky, a crispy, chewy flatbread that you can get at the grocery store. You can get it at Trader Joe's. And then you make a really kind of midwestern taco night type of filling with like ground beef. My mom uses Ortega spice blend and taco sauce into the filling. And then you top it off with like cheese, lettuce, and tomato. And I ate that literally yesterday. And I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. Like so good. And I was like, is this worth a recipe? And so I feel like I'm working towards like this side of my recipe development that is like so easy, and I'm like, do I need to share this? And I don't know the answer yet. Yes. Okay, one more question. Anyone? Yes.
Okay, I just made a comment for your first book because I didn't know you had the second book. But the first book is the bread made in the Chinese dumpling, all the thing. And the bread, my memory when I was a little, we can walk into the store to buy those in the bakery. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I tried one of your recipe too last week, fog off.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
and,
Yes. Yeah. So fog out, for anyone that doesn't know what that is, are these steamed cupcakes.
rice cake.
Yeah.
And I tried it. My husband loved it. I baked on I think Wednesday night and Thursday night was all gone.
Wow. Yeah.
And I like your cookbook because most Chinese cooking book always use weight measurement. It's a hard, sometimes inconvenient. You have the balance, you measure and
Mm-hmm.
you have made a weight measurement. You also have cup. That's my favorite because you just take cup and that's what I really appreciate. That's my comment for you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
I didn't know who you are, so I bought it.
Okay. That's amazing. Yeah, I like to have both options for everyone. Again, everyone cooks different, and my goal as a recipe developer is to write as clearly as possible and also provide you with everything you need to make a good recipe, even if you don't follow it exactly. So, thank you. Is that it? Okay, awesome. Thank you all. Thanks. Thank you, Aubrey.